Maz, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Bad.
Bad? Why bad?
No, not bad. We're having a frustrating day in the office today because the city of De Pere has decided that I guess today is the day to cut down a bunch of trees and bushes in our neck of the woods.
Of course. Why not?
So, yeah, starting around 10 o'clock this morning, I started to hear this buzzing in my audio in the booth, and I was like, what's that? What's going on? What's happening?
Yeah.
Well, dear listeners, it's this giant truck with a crane on it and men with chainsaws. And then behind the giant truck is this tree shredder thing. Mm-hmm. Think Fargo.
Yeah.
It's one of those. And so, and so far they've made their way about, 200 yards down the alley.
Yeah.
They're currently parked right behind the building.
We're rolling the dice right now.
Hopefully they don't make more noise, but so that's cut into my workday a little bit, which is always frustrating.
Mm-hmm. The woes of being a self-employed narrator. You have to set your own schedule, and sometimes that is completely disrupted by city workers.
What with the noises and whatnot.
Yeah.
But what are you working on? What's new with you?
Still trucking away at I want to say Find the Gin 2. That's not what it's called. It's not even like the series name, but in my brain, that's what I always refer to it as. Wild Contracts 2.
Mm-hmm. You found the gin.
I found the gin. Okay. He's been found. Mm-hmm. So this is beyond that point now. Mm-hmm. Actually, I've been doing really, really well. Once I untangled that weird plot problem I was having, now it's just been full steam ahead.
Okay, good.
Just really putting down words, which is awesome. Playing around with some slash fiction, and I'm right at the finish line for that dinosaur anthology thing that I have to finish up, but I'm right at the steamy part, and I keep coming back to it being like, not right now, because those are sometimes very frustrating to write. It's some of the best parts in the book, but for me, and I think a lot of MM romance authors get this way, where we're just not right now, because you've got to think of all the positions and how you want it to work out, and I'm just I'm just not in the mood for it.
Right.
So I keep opening it and being like, I'm just going to the next thing. So, but hopefully next week I can be like, hey, I'm done with it. I just sat down and just knocked it out. But we'll see.
Hey, listeners, make sure to follow up with Maz and see how that
hey,
went.
it's Saturday. What you doing?
Yeah, right.
Put down Baldur's Gate. Go finish your fucking story.
Has that been taking up your time as predicted?
It actually hasn't. Well, you know what? It's been kind of, but not because we've been playing the game. It's been trying to get everything working so we can play the game. So we've been
do I even want to know what that means?
It's just a bunch of bullshit.
Okay.
I mean, ordering things and it not working and trying to troubleshoot this thing. So we finally actually were able to sit down and play last night co-op at 8 o'clock. I go to bed at 9. So I was like, yay, and then went to bed.
Right.
So hopefully this week I can actually play it more.
It works.
It
Good
works.
night.
Yeah, basically. So I made my character and was like, yay, my elf boy's pretty. I decided to go elf instead of dragon, as if anyone gives a shit.
Okay.
And
no, I think this is important. I think that people care.
Okay, good. I decided to not do a dragon because I thought the makeout scenes would be goofy. And Alex was like, do you really want to be? Because I was like, it'd be funny. It'd be so funny. And he was like, is that what you want though? You want it to be funny? And I was like, no, I don't. I want it to be steamy. So I actually made an attractive, pretty male, elf boy instead of my hot dragon boy that I originally thought I was going to roll.
Well, you know what? You can always try again later.
Yeah, I can re-roll and do something else with a dragon.
Right.
There you go.
So a very productive week for you.
Yeah, a very productive evening yesterday. I spent an hour crafting a character and then went to bed. So
it's sort of like writing a book.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I figured something out and go, okay, I got it. I didn't put any words down, but I figured it out. Yeah. Good night. What have you been working on, Kirt?
I started a new series this week through Podium Audio. It is a fantasy series, so who knows? Maybe we'll start we'll get in touch with the authors and bring them on. But the book is called Dragon's Dawn by Sam Burns and W.M. Fox.
Ooh, I love them.
Really?
Yeah, I really
good.
like Sam and W. But yeah, I've read, I forgot which one I read, but it was like 2 years ago. It was some really cool magic-y one that takes place in like a university. I'll have to dig through my...
Ooh, yay.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Well,
I really
I'm so
liked
glad
it.
you're already familiar with the authors.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes
they're great.
hopefully life a little bit easier.
Yeah, I got to meet them at GRL a couple of years too, and they're just like, they're wonderful.
Fantastic.
They're a delight.
Guess who's doing the reach out?
Yeah, I'll send them an email and be like, hey.
Yeah, so I just started. It's a co-narrated series. I'm working with a new co-narrator, and yeah, so far I'm really liking the whole world that they've built. I get to pull out my Russian accent.
Lovely.
So that's always fun.
Yeah.
In the world of accents, the Russian one is actually, I think, one of the easier ones.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been when I could record today for those couple hours. It was a good day. So hopefully I'll still be able to wrap that up tomorrow because it's a co-narration. I'm only actually doing half the book. And then I start Gardens and Ghosts because it has to come out next Friday.
Yeah,
so
well, that's fun.
We have to actually record it at some point.
Yeah,
so that
that
it can,
little piece of the puzzle.
That tiny little detail.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm pulling like an indie author move where it's going to be like done probably the day before it comes out.
Nice. Well, that's kind of fun.
Look at me.
Yeah.
Look at me. The glory of releasing your own audiobooks.
Yeah, exactly.
And not having to depend on a distributor to like approve it and never knowing when it's going to come out.
Yeah, that's always kind of I'm appreciative to Tantor for picking up as many books as I have because otherwise I probably wouldn't have been able to do it at that stage in my career. But yeah, it takes a hot minute for them to go through their channels and their proofing and then ACX and all that nightmare stuff. So yeah, it's kind of nice being able to be like, oh, we'll just Friday, we'll just it'll be ready by then. So
it'll be ready and it will come out.
Yeah.
So it'll be ready before Friday because spoiler alert, although I don't know what, this doesn't spoil anything for anybody. It's just like a heads up, a production note maybe. Like I am actually going to my nephew's wedding next weekend. So I'll be out of the office for a while. It'll be a busy week of recording because
we have to fit everything in.
Yeah, we have to do a lot next week before I leave on my vacation. A vacation. It is a vacation.
I'm sure
family
part
weddings
of it will
are
be
a
fun.
vacation.
Yeah. And I don't know how your family operates, but even with my family, that is, I love them to death, but oh my God, there's like little bits that are fun in between the like, Dad, please stop talking situations. So,
well, this is with my in-laws.
Okay.
So generally they're very pleasant to be around. The only issue I have when we do the family visits is just the alone time factor. Cause like I'm an introvert. I need alone time to recharge my batteries and there's very little of it.
That's fair.
But my in-laws, I think, have actually gotten used to the fact that sometimes I just need to peace out and be by myself. And like, why is Kirt sitting in that room all by himself? Because he needs to.
Yeah.
He just needs to be alone.
Yeah.
Give him an hour. Yeah. He'll be back.
Yeah. That's fair.
So that's all good. And it will be exciting. I guess there's just that part of my brain that thinks like, if you're going to another location for a reason that you wouldn't otherwise be going to that event, or that location, then it's not truly a vacation.
I feel you.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to Minnesota because our nephew's getting married.
Yeah.
That's the event. We're there for that and all the other things that come with it. And then we're hanging out with the in-laws for a few days after. So
I feel you. Because like me and Alex try to go back to Texas every year and we actually are skipping this year so we can try to do our own vacation because going back to Texas, while great, and I get to see my friends and family and stuff, it's still like going with an agenda. Like it's expected that I go see all these people. I have to drive everywhere. I'm shoved into a guest bedroom instead of like at a private situation. So we're like in my in-laws' house or like my parents' house or something. So it's kind of a vacation, but also work. And I mean that I'm sure my mom will pick this up at some point. Love you, Mom. I'm not saying it's a job.
Not work, but there are obligations.
Right. Yeah.
And to me, it's not a vacation unless you are obligation free.
Yeah. Yeah. Like no, I'm right there with you.
Otherwise, it's a trip. You're taking a trip. You're going for a visit.
Yeah.
It is not a true vacation.
Yeah.
So although big news on the home front from Red Lake Falls, Minnesota, my in-laws finally put a queen bed in my husband's old bedroom.
Nice.
So we will actually get to sleep together in my husband's childhood bedroom.
Nice.
Because we did that a couple of times in his twin bed from when he was a kid. And
oh my God. That's nice.
Then we started sleeping in separate rooms because I was like, no, I'm not.
I would have taken one look at this and been like, no, love you. I'll see you in the morning.
You know, when you're the new guy, you don't make waves.
That's
Even
true.
me. I was like, no, it's fine. It'll be great. We'll just sleep sideways and not move.
Yeah. Nobody move.
Yeah. So that is exciting. Speaking of taking vacations from jobs, people may have noticed that over the last couple of weeks, you have talked about your day job.
Yes.
And I have not.
Yes. We live different lives when it comes to jobs.
Boy, do we. So I thought it's something we could dive into just a little bit today, probably only scratch the surface of it, really.
Yeah.
About why it is that an independent author has a day job and an independent audiobook narrator doesn't.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what it means to be an independent author and like the economics of it?
Yeah. So of course, this all boils down to like where you are in your career and like what you write and things like that. So for me personally, I've been doing self-publishing stuff for like 5 years, a little over 5 years. And I'm at the point now where I can fold what I make from my sales into like better production, but that's kind of it. Like I can afford to pay my cover artist on time. So poor Shen doesn't have to wait for me to like 2 months down the road be like, hey, I have enough to pay you for your time. So I can pay her on time. I can afford better editing instead of it being volunteer based, which is what it was for the first like 2 years of my publishing. It was just people doing favors for each other because I couldn't afford anything else. So I can afford like to run consistent ads on like Facebook, Amazon, Instagram. I think I maybe did it on Twitter once, but Twitter. So
X.
Yeah, X, Twitter X. I refuse to call it X. It's stupid. So it's at least Twitter X. But yeah, it's at this point, it's a slow crawl, but it's a lot of testing stuff to see if it works. A lot more misses than hits. So there's a lot of things where I'll dump money into and be like, oh, that super didn't work. Cool. That's a couple $100 that I can't get back.
Right.
So but you know, I've got peers who have been doing it less time than me who are, you know, this is their full-time gig. That's all they do. And of course, people's situations are all different too. I have no idea what their personal life is like. But for me, as somebody who I have no kids, I'm just married to a person and it's just us joined together making things work. I don't make enough from just my base sales to do more than just either try to elevate the book a little bit more. And like occasionally I'll be able to like pay for groceries or something, be like, yay, I helped. You know what I mean? But I still have like
Maz helped.
Yeah. I was like, don't worry, Maz has dinner tonight because I could afford to drop, like I could take us out to eat sometimes. But yeah, I still have to have a full 9 to 5 day job Monday through Friday because I have to be able to keep the lights on. And there's just no way I can do that with sales right now because it's just the nature of the beast. So.
Well, because I mean, there's so much content now. You know, like readers have so many things to choose from.
Right.
And as a result, your piece of the pie, unless it becomes outsized, like the average self-published author's piece of the pie is enough to, like you said, sort of reinvest in their business. Yeah. But not yet enough to live off of, which is insane because if you think about how much money Amazon makes on self-published authors, like they are making a killing on what you guys are producing. Yeah. And you get such a small portion of it for creating more work. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. It's a weird thing because especially with this year, they've slashed the royalties even more and like it just keeps getting worse and worse. But at the same time, that's where most of the readers are like Kindle, especially Kindle Unlimited, which I'm not, you know, if you're on Kindle Unlimited and you're enjoying the content that way, keep doing that. That's great. I'm not saying don't do that at all because there's a lot of, especially right now, because within the MM romance community, we're pretty transparent about like why we charge as much as we do or like how our financial standings are. So people are aware, like why a lot of us are doing Patreons or like trying to diversify, because what we're making on these platforms, which is kind of our only avenue, unless we are willing to take a huge pay cut, and we already don't make a ton. So if we wanted to try to branch out from Amazon and go wide and be in like Barnes and Noble and stuff, that is like starting all the way back over, which a lot of it, I can't do that right now. Like if I would have to be like, I'm okay with making literally zero money or negative money for like 3 months until I can kind of start building up those little audiences everywhere else. Because there's the people who are on KU aren't going to Barnes and Noble. Why would they do that? So it's a totally different audience. So it's just one of those things, trying to find that middle ground of like what's working, what can I financially like push the boundaries of without like folding in on myself, but at the same time not locking myself into such a tiny box that I'm like, well, I guess I'll just never make past this amount. So it's tricky.
Yeah. Well, and that's when you see people railing against Amazon or Audible, the reason is because they don't pay the people who are creating the content enough by any measure. No, they just don't pay them enough. Yeah. But at the same time, we can't in good conscience tell an author, oh, just don't go on Amazon. And I can't tell an author like, oh, don't do the exclusive deal with Audible. Because if that's where 80% of your market is, you'd be cutting off your nose to spite your face to say, well, I'm just not going to go there then. People will find me elsewhere. No, they won't.
Yeah.
It's almost a monopoly on the self-publishing market. And for a very long time, ACX/Audible was a monopoly on the self-publishing audiobook market.
Yeah.
There are a few other options now, but I can tell you from experience, they don't pay back as well as Amazon does, because Amazon is still where most of the sales are. So if you go through somebody else that's then going through Amazon, you're just cutting your profits at each stage.
Right.
Because eventually it's going through Amazon.
Yeah. It's unavoidable, and it's unfortunate, and nobody likes that situation, but it's how the industry is right now. Like it's either you somehow you play ball, you are on Amazon, you're making at least something, and then you try to make it up in different avenues. Or sometimes there's plenty of people who have gone wide and it worked out great, and now they've got all these different revenue streams and they're kicking ass. But the majority of people, that's not how it works. Right. It's not their life at all. Like I think I know 1 or 2 people who are wide, whereas everyone else I know is KU. So
much depends on what else is going on in your life as a creative person. Like, I don't know that I would be a full-time audiobook narrator if we hadn't moved to Green Bay, because that move is what allowed me to quit my old job,
right,
and say, well, let's buy a house with only your income in mind, honey. Let's buy a modest house so that I have time to be basically unemployed and see if I can start a business.
Right.
And I was a little bit established when I started that journey, but like I had less than 50 books out, maybe 40 or less. I mean, it wasn't much.
Yeah.
But it was like, if ever there was a time to give it a shot, it was this time. But I often say to people who ask me how and when I did it, is I would not have had the time to be a full-time audiobook narrator until I was a full-time audiobook narrator.
Right. Yeah.
Because it took that time to be able to market myself and get in front of people and say, give me more work. And yes, I am available for the work that you want to give me. I don't have to push you off because I'm busy that month and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's almost like until you have the time, you'll never have the time.
Yeah. Right. Like it's a weird backwards puzzle. Like if I was able to be in a situation where I could write full time and just start producing a ton of words, and that's a whole different journey of training your brain to be that kind of person. Because I've got my 9-to-5 job that I know I have to sign in at this time and I get to leave at this time. But if you took those guardrails away, I'd have to train myself to be like, no, I have to sit down and put on the Maz hat and work for 8 hours because I have the time. I have 8 hours to do that. So even then, that's got to be its own journey. Like I don't know if you had that same issue. Like when you went full time.
I still have that issue. Yeah.
You're like, I don't want to do this today.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's the hardest part of what I do is the making yourself do it.
Yeah.
When there's no coworkers to compare yourself against, there's no boss to answer to.
Right.
And like, I am just a bad self-discipliner, you know?
That's fair.
Like, I don't tell myself like, you need to get to work right now. Otherwise, tomorrow you is going to have more work to do because today you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Like, some people are better at that. I'm not one of them.
That's
I think
fair.
a lot of creative people I talk to aren't great at that.
Yeah.
The self-motivation part.
Yeah. That's, I would hope I would be okay at it, but I'm sure I'd have days where I'd be like, I'm not feeling it and I don't want to.
And I think that's natural, and you just have to plan those.
Yeah.
Like, not know, like, you're never going to know when they are. You almost have to build in time in every project to be like, there are going to be some days where my brain, in my case, where my brain and my mouth, they're not talking to each other.
Yeah.
So
That's fair.
we just had like, try for a while, give it your best shot. But yeah, there are some days where it's like, my mouth isn't mouthing today. My brain isn't braining. And go do something else.
Yeah.
Because you can't force your way through those sorts of
not when it
blocks.
comes to like creative stuff. That's a whole different, like I can force myself to do day job things. Like if I've got to do emails and
because
stuff.
you're accountable to somebody else.
Yeah, I have to. You
And
know?
usually that project or that task has a pretty limited set of strictures.
Yeah.
Like, you know what you have to get done. You know when it begins, you know when it ends.
Yeah,
Done.
exactly.
It's never ending when you're freelance because you're always working on the next thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so any time you take for yourself, I remember when I first started, like, I would feel so guilty to not be working. It's part of the reason I have an office instead of working from my home. Because if I could be working from my home, then it would feel like, shouldn't I be working if I have any free time?
That's a big one. That is, I really struggle with that for even just the tiny windows of time that I get, because I'll get home. And Mondays, I've officially made Mulligan Mondays. Like, I don't do any creative stuff on Mondays.
Good.
Because I'm like, I'm too tired because I'm going back to work and things like that. So I would get home, make some dinner, sit down and like try to like switch gears. And I just could not do it. And I always feel like shit when I'm not putting some words down because I'm comparing myself to my peers, or I feel like I'm letting the readers down because it takes me longer to get books out because I'll take an entire evening to just be a blob because my creative juices are just not there. I'm too tired. So yeah, I still struggle with that crap. Like, I'll have an entire afternoon and I'll get like 1,000 words down and be like, I could have done more. I'm like, well, okay, but maybe that's all you can do today.
Right.
Like, that's fine.
Right. But if you have too many of those in a row, it's like, okay, no, now you gotta.
Yeah, right.
Now you have to buckle down and actually get shit done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, every job, grass is always greener. I wouldn't go back to working a job in an office again if I can avoid it.
That's fair.
I can't imagine ever going back into customer service. I've had too many years of not having to deal with coworkers or customers. So
Especially
those muscles have atrophied. The ability to deal with other people's bullshit is low. So yeah, if robots take over my job, like they want to, I don't know what the next step will be, but it probably will not be a job where a lot of other people are.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to stay independent at this point. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure this will be an ongoing theme, but that's a little bit of insight into the world of the working author and the working narrator. And it is different worlds.
Oh yeah, big time.
Like there are people who do it, but there's just no way I would have my output if I wasn't doing this full time.
Yeah.
I would not be able to go to a job, work 8 hours, and then also get done, 6 hours in the booth.
Yeah, there's no way.
To push out what I need to push out every day. It's just not mentally or physically sustainable.
Yeah.
So part of the cure for that, as you mentioned, is our Patreon. This is one way for us when corporations don't want to pay us what we are worth, we can appeal to the people who enjoy our content and say, hey, if you want to chip in a little bit more just to let us continue to be creative and create content for you, that's what Patreon is there for. As we already discussed, our Patreon is launching today.
Yay!
When listeners are listening to this episode. So if you are hearing this, you can right now go find Hoof and Fang on Patreon and you can support us at one of two levels.
Yep.
We have our Dear Reader level at $5. So those are for people who enjoy the podcast and want to get all the extra perks that come with being on Patreon, including bonus episodes, bonus interviews, and some other things coming down the line.
Right.
We'll discuss that in a moment. Or there is the Dear Listener level. That's a $10 a month Patreon subscription. And if you are at the Dear Listener level, each month you will get an audiobook.
Yeah.
A full-length audiobook, the first one of which will be Gardens and Ghosts, the Relic audiobook, number 5, that is releasing in print and ebook and audiobook all on the same day.
Yeah.
1 week from today, September 22nd.
Yes.
And just a reminder, if you didn't hear it before, you must have the BookFunnel account and app set up in order to download the audiobook. So if you're joining us at that Dear Listener level, or if you want to purchase the audiobook a la carte independently, either way, you will need that BookFunnel account to actually receive the files and listen.
Right. And the BookFunnel account is free. So
yeah. So really, except for
just have to sign up
for the hassle of giving one more company your email,
right,
and downloading another app to your phone, which I think we all roll our eyes at one point or another.
For sure, I'm the same way.
That is the only downfall of needing BookFunnel. It is free and it's a really easy to use app. So all right. So one thing that we have not talked to folks about is how the Patreon can grow. So we decided early on that we didn't want to have 6, 7, 8 tiers where we are producing content for people who pay more.
Yeah. We don't have it was more of a, we don't want it to make it inaccessible. And we also didn't want to overburden ourselves with so many things because we're trying to do all these different tiers of things. Like I've seen some really cool Patreon pages where they've got crazy stuff that they're doing every month, and I don't know how they're doing it. They're superhuman, but we were like, we're gonna have to restructure this to make it make sense for us.
Well, and because I mean, you can have those crazy things at high tiers, but then if even one person subscribes at that tier, you've got to make that thing.
Yeah,
and it might only be enjoyed by one person. Right, literally, it could be one person.
Yeah, at a crazy high tier.
Yeah, so then you're having to do that tier and everything below it, and that just didn't make sense for us.
Right.
And also, if we're gonna create stuff, we want people to enjoy it.
Yeah,
we want people to actually listen to it.
Right. Yeah, I want people to enjoy the amount of work that we put into these things. It's the more eyes, the better. So yeah.
So it's less about how much you're willing to pay and more about how much you're willing to help us promote the podcast. So if you want more things to come from Hoof and Fang, we're counting on you to help us bring more people into the fold. So we already have the bonus episodes. Like we said, we already have the 1 audiobook per month for the Dear Listener level. If we get to 100 subscribers, what will we do?
We are going to do a monthly live stream episode. So we'll jump on either on Patreon or Discord or something. And we're going to do a live broadcast where readers can pop on, message us questions, shoot the shit, and we'll make an episode out of it. And you guys can join us for the episode, which will be really fun.
Yeah. Then at 250 subscribers,
I'm going to start doing some fun little Maz Universe /fiction. So /fiction to me means just slice of life fun fictions within my universe. So Relic short stories, maybe some Stallion Ridge stuff. I'm thinking about doing some crossovers, maybe Stallion Ridge boys and the Relic boys find a portal and they talk to each other. I don't know. So just some fun, some of it will be canon, some of it won't be. Just fun little extra bonus stuff for people because I like to write it and I know that people enjoy fun little extra little bits of those universes. So,
right.
Yeah, I'll start producing those more, which is fun.
And we will also bring those in audio.
Oh, yes.
So there will be additional audio content from those short stories. Speaking of Stallion Ridge.
This is the one I think I'm most excited
I am. You know what? Honestly, I am too. So at 500 subscribers, if we can get to 500, which would be
phenomenal.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It would be amazing. Maz has written a whole series, the Stallion Ridge series. how many books was it? 7?
7. Yeah.
7 books
Yeah.
That have never come to audio.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not just going to bring them to audio. Instead, I think they are tailor-made to be like the gay romance version of an old-timey radio show.
I love that idea so much.
So if we get to 500 subscribers, we will be creating the Stallion Ridge radio plays.
Yes.
So it'll be an episodic version of the stories as they unfold, made with character actors,
Yes.
sound effects, music,
It's so
like
cool.
really bring it to life.
Yeah.
It will not be a verbatim audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it will be that episodic radio play version of Stallion Ridge.
It's like tune in next week to find
Yes,
out. Yeah,
exactly.
It's going to be a blast. Like I'm like, come on, man, let's get to
I
500.
know, right?
I want it so bad.
Not too quickly. No,
Yeah.
but you know what? If we have to make one next month because we suddenly have 500 subscribers, oh well, we'll do it.
Right, we'll make it work.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
For sure.
Speaking of things that scare the hell out of me if we get there too fast.
Say we got ambitious with
Right.
these goals.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
this was ambitious enough because, again, if we just suddenly jump all these goals, it's going to be like next month's going to be busy.
Right.
So the next tier is going to be at 750 subscribers.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and you've committed to doing 2 audiobooks a month.
Right.
So that means our dear listeners will get 2 audiobooks a month, which is so cool for them.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of work for you.
Right. And to be clear, it does not have to be 750 dear listener subscribers. So even
Yeah, this
people
is
who are
just-
at the $5 level, you
Right.
count towards that number, even if you're buying the books a la carte from our online store.
Right.
But yeah, if we are at 750, we will go from 1 audiobook a month to 2 audiobooks a month.
Yep.
The part of that really makes me excited is I'm really hoping that we will be able to serve a segment of the author population that doesn't usually get served, which would be those people who have put in the work and they've created these great stories, but they don't have the sales yet, they don't have the savings yet to invest in audiobooks. This was, I hope, will be a really great way to bring stories that otherwise would never make it to audio, but with a human voice
Yes.
and not doing AI narration,
Right.
which sucks.
Yes. Yeah. I'm really excited about that because there's so many amazing authors I know who put out these beautifully written masterpieces of storytelling. And, back to the previous conversation, it just takes so long to get to the point where you can just put things in savings instead of just folding it back into ads and things like that, that it's hard to really put that kind of weight behind a audiobook production because, it understandably costs a lot to produce them. And not everyone is as fortunate enough as me where Tantor reaches out and is like, hey, we'll pick it up for you. That doesn't happen for a lot of people who have epic stuff out there.
Right.
So
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. One,
So
we want to hit
excited.
that level. 2, we need to hear from the authors who think their work might work for us.
Yeah.
In this context.
For
So
sure.
more details to come on that soon. And then our last goal, if we hit 1,000 subscribers, huge goal.
Yep.
Absolutely huge. We will create original radio plays.
So it won't just be Stallion Ridge stuff. It'll be
It won't be an
brand new.
adaptation. It will be brand new, original characters, original plots.
Yeah.
It'll be like a brand new series.
Yeah. Exclusive Hoof and Fang kind of situation. So
Yes. So that's where we're at, guys.
Mm-hmm.
We anticipate that it will take time to reach all of these goals.
Yeah.
Prove us wrong,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you'd like to prove us wrong.
Amen.
Oh no.
Yeah. But yeah, so we assume that it will take some time to reach these goals. We will be very excited to hit our first goal of 100 subscribers so we can start doing those monthly live streams and start interacting with people on a more regular basis, actually talking, actually chatting. So yeah, that is that. All right. So today we have our interview with author Tavia Lark. Tavia Lark writes fantasy, romance, and erotica. Her favorite romance tropes include hurt/comfort, sharing a bed, I like that one, and enemies to lovers.
I like that one.
I struggle with that one. I know. She is the author of the Perilous Courts series, which I co-narrate with John Solo, as well as the Radiance series. Here is our conversation with Tavia Lark. Welcome to the Hoof and Fang podcast, Tavia Lark.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
We're very excited to chat with you about queer speculative fiction, particularly the Perilous Courts series, which I know a thing or two about because I have the pleasure of narrating them with John Solo. But before we get into anything specific, I'd love to just find out a little bit more about who you are, where you're from, and how you got into writing.
All right, so like a lot of writers, I've been writing since forever. The first book I ever started to write was a children's book that I was around age 7, and I called it The White Filly. I just read The Black Stallion, and I didn't want to be copying it. So I changed the words to The White Filly, and it was totally different. But more recently, I played around with self-publishing in 2016, writing erotica, because I had written a lot of fan fiction, and that seemed like a good, something to play around with. Took a break from that when my day job got busier, and then, like a lot of people, I got laid off due to the pandemic in a kind of shitty way. My boss told us we were being furloughed, implying it was temporary, and then just never got back to us. So I have dedicated one of my books to my boss for ghosting me.
Oh my God.
And after a few months of trying to find a job in my area, in my field, during the pandemic, I decided maybe self-publishing again would be easier. So I went back to writing and publishing as an easier job to get. Not saying it's easy. And I wanted to see if fantasy, which is, really where my heart lies, would be enough to support me. And if The Necromancer's Light, which was my first book coming back, if that had tanked, I would have pivoted to werewolves. Even though that's not exactly my favorite, but I thankfully did not have to pivot to werewolves, and I am still writing fantasy romance right now.
So werewolves are popular? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. I mean,
a little bit.
I'm going to go on a
limb.
Might have
heard.
Yeah.
You might have heard.
Yeah.
They're here and there. But yeah, I don't like paranormal world building as much as second world fantasy, just from a writer's perspective.
So from a non-writer, what does what you just said mean? What is the difference between paranormal and second world fantasy?
So paranormal it's more set in the real world. And so it's our normal world, but there's werewolves or vampires. So Twilight is paranormal. But fantasy could be set in our world, or it could also be set in a second world. So Game of Thrones set on Westeros would be second world.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I knew that term, but I didn't know it by that name. So I have learned something today.
I usually sell my books as high fantasy because that is a more broadly known term than second world. And I don't want to turn off people who might think, oh, that sounds like kind of specific and weird.
Well, if I didn't know it was high fantasy and you said second world, I would almost think maybe sci-fi, because I'm thinking
exactly.
Another planet or something. Like my brain goes the wrong direction. But yeah, high fantasy, I get. I was like, oh yeah, elves, knights, dragons, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my first answer was me writing shop talk, and yeah, high fantasy is when I'm talking to readers.
Yeah. So you said The Necromancer's Light was your first book, sort of trying to make the fantasy work for you. So what is that book about, and what is the world that you've built for that series?
So that is my Radiance series. And the first book is about a necromancer whose dark magic means that he'll die without human touch. And you can see kind of how that would lend itself to a romance. Because also everyone dislikes him because he's a necromancer. So he needs touch, but nobody wants to be near him. So he's constantly cold and sad. Hurt comfort is my favorite trope. I could read nothing but hurt comfort until the day I die and be completely happy. So a lot of my books have oh no, this beautiful man is so sad. And then he finds another kind of sad man and they make each other less sad.
I feel like if you put that in your blurb, like, you know how people put like a recap at the bottom, just put, oh no, there's a sad, beautiful man who needs another sad, beautiful man. I think that would be like a one click for a lot of people.
I think my Facebook page description might be, I write about sad magic boys falling in love.
That's awesome.
So that's
apt.
If you drill down to the core of my like literary thesis, that's it.
So what is it about those worlds that like you're drawn to?
So I've always been a fantasy fan. My dad got me into Lord of the Rings when I was around 8. So I was checking out Tamara Pierce from the school library. So the first like queer book I really remember reading was Mercedes Lackey's The Last Herald Mage, which you go there if you want another thesis statement on a sad magical man falling in love a lot.
Good to know. I know I have that book like in my basement.
Yeah, I will. If you don't mind spoilers for a book that was published in 1989, it ends tragically.
Okay.
For this sad, beautiful gay man, and
so not a happily ever after.
It is not a romance. No.
Okay.
And yeah, I read that at a very formative age, and that was just like, I was maybe 13 or 14, and I'm reading this and I'm like, oh my God, he's suffering so beautifully. Like, I've never read anything quite like this. It's incredible. And I feel like on some level, all of my writing is a reaction to, 14-year-old Tavia really wanting Vaniel to get a happy ending. So that's one thing I like about fantasy romance specifically is, it's gonna end well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm curious, and I'm just thinking back now as we're talking to like when we first got the information about Perilous Courts series, and like Podium made a point of saying that like it's very much a romance set in a fantasy world, not a fantasy with like a little bit of romance. So like how do you approach creating that balance? And if it's not too much to talk about, like, is that more because of like how you want to write, or is that to like write to market and make sure that like romance readers will be happy?
I am very fortunate that what I want to write is pretty marketable. I am like, these are my dream books. I am so happy that I am able to keep writing them, and that people keep reading them. It's fairly easy to balance the fantasy and the romance, actually. I plot it as a romance, and I don't do too much fantasy world building in advance. I think of it as like character-driven world building. So elements like, I knew I wanted same-sex arranged marriages among the royalty. That's going to be a thing in book 5, and it was a thing in book 3. So I needed a motivation for these noble societies to want to, put their sons together instead of just getting progeny from sons and daughters. And I thought, okay, well, maybe they're passing on magic and getting different noble families' hereditary magic into the marriage. So the fact that I wanted same-sex arranged marriages for the like character dynamics and the plot inspired the entire magic system for the world building.
Yeah, that's very cool. just so you know, and the listeners at home who don't know the book, like that, I that was one of the particular aspects of the stories that I was very drawn to, is that like the queens are together and very much like publicly together, but like one of them went and had kids, and it was okay. Like they were just considered also part of their family, and like,
Oh, that's cool.
you know, like I was like, this is so cool. And then, yeah, I mean, obviously there's queerness among the gentlemen as well. But like, I just love the way that was treated as like, I'm not a royals person, so I don't know like
I'm not either.
the familial line or whatever, you know, whatever the ascendancy or descendancy or like all of that nonsense was really all about intention rather than biology.
Right.
And so that really like opened up the world for me the first time I was reading it, as like, oh, this is really neat and a different way of thinking about like the royal family.
Yeah, that is cool. That makes it interesting. And you can kind of play around and do a lot with that. Like if it's not tied to just having heirs, like, I mean, obviously it's part of it because they have to, you know, continue the bloodline, but having a different spin on it, that's cool. And like, I'm with you. Like when it comes to building out magical worlds and things like that, I kind of come up with it as needed as like the story progresses. So like I know where you're coming from when it comes to that, where like, I know this particular thing I want in the story for sure. Now I have to craft the world around it because, well, he's got to get married to this guy and it has to work, you know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's cool.
If I did all the world building in advance, I'd never write a book. I would just be stuck making spreadsheets forever.
Yep. Same. 100%.
Yeah.
That sounds so fun to me.
I know you and my husband.
I want to make spreadsheets about like magical worlds. I was going to say too, so like, did you know in advance, was it like part of the conceit of the story? And by the way, we are talking about Perilous Courts now, everybody, because like we've transitioned.
Oh, yeah, we switched.
Was it a part of the world building that like the families would have different types of magic?
Yes.
Specifically? Okay.
Yes.
And do you know, are there like types of magic that have not yet been introduced?
Yes, because I did not want to limit myself in advance. There will be types of magic revealing themselves as they become useful to the story, essentially. Like one thing, the Grails, who are people who are born with like innate reserves of magical power, but they can't use it themselves. So they're basically like magic batteries for other mages. I mentioned them once in the first book, and I don't even say that they're people. I just mention like a list of things like, oh, he could have gotten a mansion, he could have gotten a grail as a reward. And I just kind of toss that off, and then the concept of grails becomes more important later in the series.
So did you know in book one, when you were saying that like somebody asked for a grail, but it's too hard to get?
Yeah.
That the reason was because it would basically be like slavery?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
See, I did not catch that until just now.
I kind of tucked it in as like maybe this will be fun for people when they reread after the whole series is over. Which,
for sure.
You know, hopefully people will enjoy it enough to reread.
Yeah. Well, and I think like you're clearly enough of like a fan of reading and these types of stories to think that way. To think like I'm not gonna just lay it all out. There was no like long description in book one about like how, you know, each family has these powers and that thing. And there's nothing wrong with doing things that way either, but like, yeah, we've just kind of discovered things as time goes on. And yet it's never confusing. And I never feel like, oh, we were lacking in backstory or I don't quite fully understand how the world works. Because you do give the backstory for the story that's happening in front of us.
Yeah, I try to keep world building information need to know, or, you know, enough for flavor. But yeah, I'm not a fan of long info dumping. Here's exactly how the magic system works. Explanations. I feel like those kind of slow down the story. And I'm intentionally trying to write these as kind of like gateway drugs to fantasy. So, you know, people who already read fantasy, I hope they enjoy them too. but I also want them to be very accessible for, MM romance readers who don't read a lot of fantasy already.
Well, and that soft world building, like that organic world building, kind of makes, at least for me as a reader who likes, big lavish worlds and crazy magic and things like that, when you parse it out in little bites like that on like a need to know basis, it kind of helps you make the world more real, because you're learning stuff as the story's going instead of having to absorb like a textbook's worth of understanding like the hierarchies and then the banners and the magic system. Like there's going to be a test at the end of the book. You know what I mean? Like for me, being able to immerse into the world and then like rereading and catching little things like that with the Grails and being like, oh, I know what that means now because like from book one and things like I love that style of world building as a reader so much because it makes me really fall like head first into the world that way. So good job.
Cool. A textbook is a great way of putting the info dumping because I don't want readers to feel like they're studying. Yeah,
that's what it feels like. Like I guess the most guilty thing for me would be like the first or second Song of Ice and Fire book was kind of like that. Like there was a whole encyclopedia at the very back that you had to reference when they were talking about banners, and I like allowed myself to get over that, but I think now I don't have the patience for it. So if I was reading like a high fantasy book and it was expected that I had to like flip pages to remember somebody's name, I'd be like, I don't care. Like it's too much work.
Yeah, my husband's a huge Song of Ice and Fire fan, and he often talks about reading the books like with his iPad because he has an app that like lists out all the people and the places and how they relate to one another. And I was like, I don't know if I need an app to enjoy a book series, that might be too much. And look what's happened. Like he can't finish the story because it's too much. Yeah. There's probably like too many like loose threads that even he's like, I don't know.
Oh, I don't remember any of that stuff now. And we're not going to monopolize the conversation. We're talking about Song of Ice and Fire. But there's so much happening in that book and they're so spaced out. I wouldn't be able to tell you anything of what's going on now. I couldn't just pick up book 5 or whatever they're on now.
Yeah. So. I'm curious if there are any like specific things in the books that you write. I'm going to use the Fell Cats as an example. Like,
yes.
How do you like what inspires an element like that? And like you also include like dragons or even the magic system. Like, is there something that you've read or consumed or just really loved that like was like, oh, this is how I can use that in this world?
So one behind the scenes secret of my writing is that I like to make up magic fantasy animals because I don't have to worry about real world animals being portrayed incorrectly. So if they are fell cats, which are essentially big, colorful tigers with magic powers, if they behave differently than a normal tiger would behave, well, it's not because I got tigers wrong. It's because they're a fell cat. So nice. that is one of my secrets. Yeah, no, I like including animal companions in the books because I'm a big animal person, and I think they're a great way of bringing humor into a story. They are a great way of humanizing the characters. Like Whisper, the assassin, he is totally ready to kill Prince Julian, but they bond over liking cats. So inspiration-wise, it's kind of like the world building. They come in as I need them in the story, and then once they're in, I build off of them. So because I had the fell cats in book 1, I was trying to figure out how to get fell cats back into book 3 because they were really, really popular. And I didn't have any in book 2. I just had a teleporting ferret instead, which was also pretty popular.
I was going to say, that had to also be I would not believe it if you were like, yeah, the fans didn't really like that.
Oh no, they loved it. They loved it.
That was so cool.
I was very gratified by the response to the teleporting ferret.
Yeah, like when is the plush toy coming out?
Right? Yeah, it's kind of the Disney principle of, make sure your content has cute animal companions for merch. They Some of my Patreon tiers do give Fellcat stickers or a Blink Mink mug. So plug for patreon.com/Tavia Lark if you want a sticker of Rumi and Fisk the Fellcat. But yeah, so like for book 3, I was thinking, how do I get Fellcats back in here? And then I just had this like lightning strike epiphany. And these lightning strikes are like, they're so helpful. You cannot count on them at all. But every once in a while, you just get slammed with inspiration. And I realized I could have baby Fellcats.
Yeah.
And I had baby Fellcats.
I viscerally remember my reaction when I was prepping book 3 because I think it was literally like, oh no, she didn't. like of course there's baby Fellcats. Like, of course. Yeah. So what are the stories that you haven't told yet that you want to?
So right now I just finished up drafting the 4th Perilous Courts book, and there are going to be 6 total. So I'm currently very like deep in that world.
Or more. Whatever, you know.
The
this
thing is...
this is the thing I do when authors write things I like. I'm like, sure. 4, 5, 6 or more.
The thing is, I did intentionally set this series up so it could hypothetically go on infinitely. Because I can just keep adding neighboring countries with, conveniently 3 sexy, eligible single princes. I have no shame.
Perfect.
I have no desire to make anything more realistic with, okay, it seems kind of improbable that all of these neighboring countries would have 3 sexy, single, eligible princes. But no, I don't care. If I wanted to continue, as long as it's in multiples of 3, I could keep going. But
nice.
currently, we're going to end at 6. 6 is... I haven't written it yet, so it exists perfectly and unflawed in my head. 6 is currently my favorite. Lots of beautiful suffering in 6.
That's a lot to live up to.
Yeah, I was about to say.
No, I'm going to be waiting for it.
I'll say, since I didn't come into writing fantasy romance directly from romance genre, there were some terms that I didn't know until I was already writing them. I didn't know the trope name Grumpy Sunshine until everyone was saying it in the reviews of The Necromancer's Light. I was like, oh, I guess I wrote a thing. And then I also somehow didn't know, I don't know how I missed this one, but I didn't know the word queer norm until people were using it to describe my books. Where
I don't know what that means.
I was about to say, I've never heard that.
So it means a fantasy world, or maybe not necessarily a fantasy world, but a fictional world where being queer is normalized. There's not any, deliberate homophobia or transphobia. In my books, the queens are married, and that's totally unremarked upon. There's an arranged marriage with 2 dudes, totally unremarked upon. I have some trans side characters who are I mention them as an author because I want it to be clear to readers that trans people exist in my worlds, but it's pretty unremarkable from the in-character point of view.
Yeah, I had not heard that term before, although I've encountered that reality in books quite a bit, almost entirely. It's very rare for me to be approached about doing a book where homophobia and transphobia and any sort of stigma or discrimination exists. Yeah,
it's a lot easier to sink into the fun fantasy romance when it's just a little bit better than our world.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that my books aren't utopias. Bad shit happens. There's, assassins and evil blood magic and political strife.
I was about to say it's all politics. It's politics is the evil thing.
Mm-hmm. There's bad shit, but there's not bad shit due to homophobia or transphobia. And that was a deliberate choice I made to make it, more enjoyable for me to write and hopefully for readers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are the stories that I prefer too. Like, that I prefer to write and to read. It's like, there's so much of that in the real world. Like, that's pure escapism for me, is being able to be like elves and nobody's going to be rude about people being gay.
Yeah.
Like, let's just avoid all of that personally for me.
It also makes it perhaps a bit more, like, for me as the reader, it makes it easier for me to accept that there is no homophobia if there are also dragons.
Yeah, right.
Because it's like there's many things about this world that are different than the one I live in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And therefore I am willing to suspend my disbelief in these areas.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it easier to suspend my disbelief in this thing, which is essential human nature in like the world that I walk in every single day.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's room for a lot of different types of stories. And I wouldn't say that, my way is the best way. It's just the kind of story I want to tell.
You can say that.
Yeah.
This is the place to say that. Your way is the best way. Everybody go buy her books.
Per my, rigorous observation of the literary landscape, my way is clearly best. But, there's a huge value in just writing entertaining books. I get occasional reviews that are like, hey, I just lost myself in your book for a day and it got me through a really hard week. And I get emails from guys occasionally thanking me for, writing fantasy books with people like them. One guy said, these are the books I wish I had when I was growing up, which made me, have to sit back and take a moment. It was, really meaningful for me that he, made the effort of telling me that. And so, I think that, sometimes I get into this mindset where I'm like, oh, I'm just writing silly romance novels, but those are pretty important for people.
Yeah, I think that some of the best feedback an author can get is that exact thing where even if it's just, I had a hard week and this made my week easier, or the ones that really punch you in the heart are the ones where they're like, oh, I had cancer and I'm laying in bed, I couldn't do anything, so I listened to your audiobook so I could laugh. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go lay down and cry because that was the best thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's amazing to get those kind of, those tags or emails or whatever. And I think it's easy for us as romance authors to forget when we're in the middle of editing and we're putting out silly stuff, we're making our marketing, we're like beautiful sad boys who fall in love with each other. But those stories, we needed those out in the universe, so we made them happen. And then, it resonates with people. It changes people's day from a very, very bad day to that made them laugh and feel a little bit better when everything's kind of shitty sometimes. So, yeah.
And it's easy to forget too, how recent this movement is. We're firmly entrenched in it now, but 15, 20 years ago, walking into a bookstore and seeing a gay romance was not thinkable.
Right.
I could not think of it, And then now, knowing that there is a world, there was this world of indie authors who were creating this, and I just wasn't aware of it. It almost makes me mad, And it makes me mad that more gay men don't read these books because I think they would love them. But to let your guard down enough to try something that we internalized for so long as being a bad thing about us and our lives and having to stay quiet about it.
Yeah.
I wish more gay men read gay romance.
I think it'll get there. Maybe it takes a long time for culture shifts to happen. So
I also I just want to say, since I have you, how much I appreciated that, especially in book one, but as the books have continued as well, you include different body types. And different characterizations of what a queer man can be and sound like and look like. The fact that Whisper didn't have to be a big gruff guy. That was also one of the things that drew me into the story very early on, because I was just happy to know that I wouldn't have to do a whole book like this, you know?
Here's another, this isn't really a secret because I've said this on Patreon and on Facebook before, but I really like height differences. So I force myself to plan out my protagonist heights in advance so I don't just default to a 12-inch height difference for every single couple. So I do force the body diversity on myself because otherwise they will all be 6'3" and 5'3". Mm-hmm. If I'm just left,
listen, in this
if I'm
fantasy
left
world,
to my own devices, that's just what it'll be.
In this fantasy world, men have two heights. There's only two options.
Exactly. Maybe that'll be my next series.
It's part of the magic system.
It's the new Omegaverse. Instead of alphas and omegas, it's 6'3s and 5'3s.
The talls and the slightly less talls.
Talls and smalls.
Talls and smalls.
Oh my god.
Oh god, did we just create a genre?
We might have.
So.
We might have.
Nice. Tell us more about your Patreon. Like, when did that get started? And people who want to get involved, like, what's going on behind that Patreon wall?
Yeah, so I very optimistically started it before I published The Necromancer's Light. So I was thinking, if this takes off, I want to just be ready. And it let me, get started on writing bonus content as I went instead of, maybe if I had waited until last year to start it, then I'd be like, well, now I have to write a bunch of stuff. And now I just have an easy backlog. So on Patreon, I post chapters from my work in progress every week. So my patrons have gotten the first 15 chapters or so of Prince and Bodyguard already. And that's like my rough draft. It's readable, but there are already scenes that I know I'm going to take out or change. Chapter 1 is going to be completely different. So they get like the behind the scenes, like nobody else gets to see this because it's going to be gone in the final version sort of deal. And I do a bonus story every month that certain tiers get to vote on what I write. So past bonus stories have been Rakos and Bellamy from Prince in Disguise doing like sexy pirate roleplay, except they are about as good at pretending to be a pirate and a captive as they were at pretending to be a farmer and a minstrel. So it's very silly and arguing over whether they pretend to have a peg leg or not.
I love that.
And then Julian and Whisper get a relaxing, sexy beach vacation. And then there's some like original stories too, like a warlock who's trying to summon a fearsome demon, accidentally summons a catboy instead. So, a lot of interesting content. And they get cover reveals and title drops earlier than anyone else. And I just really like it as I'm not naturally inclined to social media. I don't like posting and having to hope that the algorithm takes my post to people. I like just, chatting with people, not worrying about whether it will reach their email inboxes or not. Like, it's more of like a chill private space. So I enjoy it. I hope that my patrons enjoy it too. It's been really fun for me.
I think the conceit is that if they didn't, they just would leave.
That's true. It's very easy to leave. Maybe I should put up some barbed wire or something to keep them. Or I'll just I'll keep dishing out the sexy pirate roleplay. I think that'll work.
The content I was gonna say that's the content they're there for, I'm sure. That sounds so
cool. Many thanks to Tavia Lark for joining us this week. You can find out more about her work at tavialark.com. That's TaviaLark.com. And all of her socials will be linked in the episode show notes. Book 4 of Perilous Courts, Prince and Bodyguard, was released in June, and the audiobook is in post-production right now, so make sure to keep your eyes peeled for that release very soon. The 5th installment of the Perilous Courts series, Prince and Betrothed, is coming this fall. And thanks to you, dear readers, for joining us for another episode of Hoof and Fang. We are loving the feedback we're getting from listeners, so feel free to reach out via any of our social media channels or email us at hoofandfangpodcast@gmail.com. Our website is hoofandfangpodcast.com, where as of today, you can find a link to our Patreon page. Subscribe to support the podcast and get access to bonus content. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.